The room was silent but filled with tension, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every small movement. Officers and analysts sat at the long tables, papers and laptops in front of them, their faces showing the stress and seriousness of their work. The walls were lined with maps, screens, and charts displaying troop movements, enemy positions, and mission updates. It was a typical military briefing room, designed for efficiency, focus, and precise communication. But on this day, everyone sensed that something unusual was about to happen. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened, and the Marine general stepped in. She carried herself with a confidence that immediately made heads turn. She didn't rush in like someone trying to impress. Instead, she moved with calm authority, each step measured and purposeful. Her uniform was immaculate, metals shining softly under the fluorescent lights, but it was her presence that commanded attention more than any decoration. Even before she spoke, the room seemed to shift. People straightened their posture, subconsciously preparing to listen, because they knew she was someone who had seen and survived more than most of them could imagine. She had a reputation, not just for her skills on the battlefield, but for her unique personality. Unlike many high-ranking officers who maintained a strict, untouchable demeanor, she balanced authority with a hint of humor and relatability. Those who had worked with her before often said she had a way of making tense situations lighter without ever losing control. She could make people laugh in the middle of chaos, but when it was time to act seriously, her focus was absolute. Today, everyone in the room would see both sides of her. As she approached the podium, she gave a small nod to the officers, acknowledging their work and presence. There was no fanfare, no exaggerated gestures, but her calm confidence filled the space more than any words could. She placed her notes on the podium but didn't immediately start reading. Instead, she scanned the room slowly, her eyes meeting those of the intelligence analysts, the captains, the lieutenants, and even a few colonels. In that brief moment, it was as if she was silently saying, "I know what we're dealing with. Trust me to lead us through it." That silent command had an almost magnetic effect. People felt both reassured and alert at the same time. The topic of the briefing was serious. Recent combat operations had been challenging, and the team needed to analyze outcomes, strategies, and mistakes. The room was full of experts who were used to high-pressure situations, but even for them, there was something about this particular general that made the atmosphere different. She had been on the front lines herself, and her experience wasn't just theoretical. She had faced danger firsthand, made life-and-death decisions, and come through successfully. That kind of experience brings a weight to a person that can't be taught, and everyone in the room could sense it. As she began speaking, her voice was calm, steady, and clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. She didn't raise her voice, didn't try to dominate the room with volume or aggression. Instead, she commanded respect through the clarity of her words, the confidence behind them, and the authority of someone who had earned it. Even the analysts, who were trained to question everything, found themselves listening without interruption. Her first words weren't about statistics or strategies. They were about understanding the situation fully, about framing the challenges they faced, and about preparing everyone for the hard truths ahead. It was a reminder that leadership wasn't about showing power. It was about guiding people, keeping them focused, and preparing them to act with precision. Yet, beneath that calm exterior, there was a subtle energy in the room. People could feel her presence influencing their thoughts. It wasn't intimidation, exactly. It was respect mixed with curiosity. They wanted to see how she would handle the briefing, how she would present her insights, and how she would make sense of the chaos of war with such composure. She had a way of making every detail seem important, every decision weighty, and yet approachable. That was her skill, balancing authority with humanity, seriousness with subtle humor, and tension with reassurance. Everyone in the room sensed that this was not going to be a normal briefing. As she continued to set the stage for the discussion, she didn't just talk at them. She spoke to them, connecting each point to the people in the room and the reality of the battlefield. She reminded them that the numbers, the enemy reports, and the operational maps weren't abstract. They were tied to lives, decisions, and consequences. And yet, she did it in a way that didn't induce panic, but instead created focus. Her presence and her words were a stabilizing force, a quiet strength that everyone in the room could feel. By the time she finished the first few minutes of her introduction, the room had changed. What had been nervous, tense, and uncertain was now attentive, alert, and ready. Officers straightened their backs. Pens were poised over notebooks, and eyes were fixed on her. She had done more than enter the room. She had set the tone. She had commanded attention not through fear, but through calm, confident authority. She had reminded everyone that leadership was not about shouting or dominating. It was about presence, clarity, and preparation. And in that moment, as she paused and looked at everyone, the room realized they were witnessing someone extraordinary. A Marine general who could walk into a room and make even the most experienced officers pay attention. Not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. The stage was now set for what would come next, but in these first moments, everyone understood one thing clearly. This briefing would be unlike any they had attended before. The room was still buzzing with tension from the opening moments of the briefing, the officer's eyes fixed on the Marine general as she calmly began discussing the details of recent operations. Everyone knew she was experienced, but no one could predict what would come next. Then, almost unexpectedly, she made a joke. It was subtle, dry, and delivered with a straight face, yet it immediately caught everyone off guard. She mentioned her confirmed kills during recent missions, phrasing it lightly, almost as if it were a casual anecdote rather than a serious matter. For a moment, the room froze. Some officers blinked rapidly, unsure if they had heard her correctly. A few nervous chuckles erupted, but they were quickly swallowed by the heavy silence. It was the kind of joke that made people stop and think. On one hand, it seemed shocking to joke about something so serious. On the other hand, it revealed her confidence, her complete control over the situation, and her fearlessness. She wasn't boasting, and she wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. She was making a statement in her own unique way. The general's humor was not careless or flippant. It carried layers of meaning, a blend of courage, experience, and sharp wit. Those who had worked with her before knew this was typical of her style. She used humor to ease tension, to demonstrate that she was unshakable, and to subtly remind everyone that she had faced life-or-death situations firsthand. In a room full of highly trained officers and analysts, this approach was both unusual and disarming. It was a small moment, but it immediately changed the dynamic of the briefing. Some younger officers were momentarily unsure how to respond. They had been trained to treat battlefield casualties with the utmost seriousness. Hearing someone joke about confirmed kills felt almost taboo. A few shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at each other, wondering if they should laugh or remain silent. But others, more seasoned, quickly recognized the intent. They understood that the joke was a tool, a way to assert authority without raising one's voice, a way to command attention while keeping the atmosphere under control. The general noticed the mixed reactions but did not hesitate. She continued speaking, weaving her humor seamlessly into the discussion of strategy and intelligence. The joke wasn't meant to distract or amuse. It was meant to set a tone. She wanted everyone to be alert but not tense, focused but not rigid. Humor, in her hands, became a method of leadership. It broke the initial barrier of fear and formality, allowing people to engage more openly with the briefing while still understanding the gravity of the situation. Her delivery was key. She spoke with a calm, measured voice, never raising it for emphasis, never gesturing wildly. Her facial expression remained steady, almost neutral, even as she delivered words that could have shocked the room. That contrast, the serious expression with the surprising joke, made it even more effective. It was impossible to ignore, impossible not to process. Every officer present understood, at some level, that this was a person who could handle extreme situations with composure, someone who could make life and death decisions while remaining fully aware of the human cost. As the initial shock faded, the room slowly began to adjust. The officers realized that the general's humor had a purpose beyond the moment. It reminded them that they were not just reviewing numbers or maps. They were dealing with real operations, real consequences, and real human lives. Her joke was a way of emphasizing that seriousness could coexist with confidence and calmness. It made the room alive, more attentive, more aware of the stakes. The analysts in particular began to watch her closely. They noticed how she could command attention not through authority alone but through personality and presence. Her humor demonstrated that she had no fear of confronting reality. She could speak openly about the dangers she had faced, the lives lost, and the decisions made under pressure. And she could do it in a way that humanized the process rather than dehumanizing it. This subtle approach was a lesson in leadership as much as it was an insight into strategy. Even the more skeptical officers began to appreciate her method. They had come to expect rigid, by-the-book briefings filled with charts, statistics, and monotone recitations. This was different. The general made them think, made them react, and made them feel the weight of every decision. The joke, unexpected as it was, served as a pivot point. It allowed her to shift from discussion of battlefield facts to deeper analysis of strategy, showing how humor and calm authority could coexist in leadership. By the time she moved past the joke and began outlining the detailed operations and intelligence findings, the room had completely shifted. Officers who had been tense, anxious, or even skeptical were now fully engaged. They were listening not just to what she said but to how she said it. They realized that her humor had been more than a joke. It had been a demonstration of mastery, a way to assert control, and a subtle reminder of her experience and confidence. The unexpected joke had done its job. It broke tension, commanded attention, and set the stage for what would follow. Everyone in the room now understood that this Marine general was not just a leader by rank but a leader by presence, by skill, and by the ability to remain unshakable under pressure. In that moment, her calm, clever humor had become a powerful tool, one that would define the rest of the briefing and leave a lasting impression on everyone present. After the unexpected joke, the room didn't immediately relax. Instead, a strange tension settled over the officers and analysts. It wasn't the same nervousness from the start of the briefing. It was something subtler, deeper, a mix of curiosity, respect, and a slight unease. Everyone was trying to understand the Marine general in front of them. They had seen high-ranking officers before, many strict and commanding, but few had the ability to combine humor, confidence, and deadly seriousness in a single moment. The room was full of experienced military minds, people trained to process information logically and emotionally, yet none had encountered a leader quite like her. The general didn't notice, or perhaps she deliberately ignored, the tension. She moved forward with her briefing as if the room were exactly where she wanted it to be. Her calmness contrasted sharply with the underlying anxiety in the room. Every word she spoke seemed deliberate, precise, and purposeful. She didn't rush through the slides or notes. Instead, she gave each point space to sink in, allowing her audience to process not just the information but also the weight behind it. Her confidence was contagious, but it also magnified the tension, because it reminded everyone that she had faced far more extreme situations than they could imagine. The maps on the walls and the digital screens were alive with symbols and numbers, troop movements, enemy positions, casualty reports, and operation outcomes. To any ordinary observer, it might have looked like a simple briefing, but to those trained in military strategy, each detail carried weight. The officers knew that every dot on those maps represented people, risk, and decisions with consequences. And here was a general who had not only commanded troops in such conditions but also managed to maintain a calm demeanor, making light of her own lethal successes without diminishing the gravity of the situation. That contrast made the tension even stronger. Some officers whispered quietly among themselves, sharing theories and observations about her approach. "She's joking to break the tension," one said. "No, it's more than that," another countered. "She's showing us how a real leader thinks. Calm, fearless, and in control." The quiet murmurs reflected the struggle in the room. How do you respect someone who talks casually about matters others can barely handle without losing composure? The general had already shifted the mental focus of everyone present. They were no longer just receiving information, they were trying to understand the mind behind the strategy. Every so often, she paused, letting the silence stretch. It was never uncomfortable silence. It was a tool, a way to draw attention, to emphasize the seriousness of the next point. Her eyes would scan the room, landing on different faces, subtly testing reactions, gauging comprehension, and commanding focus. She didn't need to shout or gesture aggressively. The room followed her naturally. But the weight of her presence made each person hyper-aware of their own role, their own thoughts, and their own understanding of the situation. The tension built further as she shifted from humor to detailed operational analysis. She began explaining the logic behind recent missions, the planning, and the split-second decisions made under fire. She spoke about coordinating multiple units, predicting enemy movements, and minimizing casualties. Her calm, methodical delivery made complex strategies seem almost simple, yet the room could feel the stakes behind every sentence. Each officer knew that mistakes in these operations could be catastrophic, and here she was, explaining it with an ease that was both impressive and unsettling. It wasn't just her knowledge that created tension, it was her confidence in it. She didn't hedge her statements or apologize for uncertainties. She presented facts and insights with authority, letting the weight of her experience speak for itself. For the younger officers, this was almost intimidating. They had studied military theory and tactics for years, but watching someone who had applied them in real life and survived was a reminder of the gap between theory and reality. The older officers nodded silently, recognizing the rare combination of skill, courage, and composure in front of them. At one point, a map highlighted an operation that had gone slightly off-plan. Normally, this might spark criticism or intense debate, but the general addressed it with calm precision, pointing out lessons learned rather than mistakes. Her words carried no defensiveness or blame, only analysis. And yet, the room felt the tension more than ever, because she demonstrated that even under pressure, she remained unshakable. It was a subtle reminder that in real combat, control and composure mattered as much as strategy. The officers' minds raced, processing the implications. They realized that humor, calmness, and authority weren't separate traits. They were all part of her leadership style. The joke from earlier, which had initially startled them, was now part of a bigger picture. She had broken the ice, captured attention, and then slowly, methodically, demonstrated the depth of her expertise. The tension in the room wasn't just about unease. It was about respect, awe, and realization. They were watching someone operate at a level few could ever reach. By the time she concluded this section, the room had transformed. What began as shock and curiosity had evolved into focused attention. Officers were leaning in, eyes sharp, minds active, processing every detail and weighing every word. The general had done more than present facts. She had set the stage for full engagement, making everyone in the room feel the seriousness of the operations while simultaneously demonstrating her unshakable command. The tension remained, but it was now productive, a concentrated energy that prepared the team for the next phase of the briefing. In that moment, the officers understood a critical lesson. Leadership wasn't just about orders or strategy. It was about presence, control, and the ability to balance seriousness with subtle influence. The tension in the room wasn't discomfort. It was the natural reaction to witnessing mastery, a mixture of admiration, focus, and anticipation. Everyone knew they were in the presence of a leader who could handle any situation, and the room, though tense, was ready to absorb every word that would follow. The room was still heavy with tension when the Marine general shifted gears. Up until this point, her unexpected joke and calm presence had captured attention, but now she was about to show why she was truly respected. She began speaking again, her voice steady, even, and measured, carrying a weight that made everyone sit up straighter. There was no rush in her words, no dramatic gestures, just a calm authority that drew every officer and analyst in the room to focus completely. She started outlining a new strategy, one designed to prevent unnecessary casualties in upcoming operations. The plan was detailed and complex, involving multiple units, precise timing, and careful coordination. As she spoke, she broke down each component in a way that was clear and easy to understand, but also revealed the depth of her thinking. She wasn't just giving instructions. She was teaching, guiding the team through the reasoning behind every decision. The calmness of her voice made even the most complicated tactical details accessible, allowing everyone in the room to follow along without feeling overwhelmed. Her calm words had a strange power. They weren't loud or commanding in the traditional sense, but they carried authority. Each sentence was precise, deliberate, and intentional. It was as if she were not just speaking, but shaping the way the officers and analysts thought about the operation. Every pause, every carefully chosen word made them more attentive, more aware of the stakes, and more aligned with her vision. The room, once buzzing with tension and uncertainty, now became focused and disciplined, hanging on every word she said. What made this moment remarkable was how effortlessly she combined strategy and human understanding. She didn't just describe movements on a map or coordinates on a grid, she spoke about the human side of operations. She emphasized the importance of protecting her troops, minimizing risk, and anticipating the enemy's moves without underestimating them. She spoke with a quiet intensity that made it clear she valued both precision and the lives of her team equally. This wasn't just a briefing. It was a demonstration of leadership, showing that calm, intelligent guidance could inspire trust and confidence even in high-pressure situations. Some officers began to realize the depth of her experience. Her calm demeanor wasn't just personality. It was proof of countless missions, split-second decisions, and challenges survived under fire. She had been on the front lines, faced life-and-death choices, and emerged not just alive but successful. Her words carried that history, that expertise, even without her needing to recount every detail. The officers sensed it, understood it, and respected it, quietly absorbing the lessons she was imparting. As she continued, she walked the room through scenarios and contingencies. She explained what to do if plans changed, how to adjust on the fly, and how to anticipate enemy tactics. Her tone never rose, yet every word commanded attention. The calmness of her command contrasted with the complexity of the situation, making it even more compelling. The officers could feel themselves thinking more clearly, responding more strategically, and absorbing not just the plan, but the mindset needed to execute it successfully. It wasn't only the content of her words that impressed the team. It was the way she delivered them. She made decisions sound logical, clear, and achievable, while subtly reminding everyone that failure was not an option. The quiet confidence in her voice carried a sense of inevitability. This was a plan that could work, and it would work because she had thought it through. Her calm command gave the room stability, a sense of order amidst the chaos that often accompanies military operations. Some younger officers were especially affected. They had read about leadership in textbooks, studied military strategy, and watched simulations, but this was different. Watching a real Marine general command with calm authority, clarity, and presence was a lesson no book could provide. They began to understand that leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about inspiring confidence, creating focus, and guiding people through uncertainty without panic. Her calm command demonstrated that true authority doesn't need to be loud or aggressive. It comes from preparation, understanding, and presence. Even the seasoned officers, who had experienced countless briefings and operations, were struck by her approach. They had seen rigid, authoritarian leadership, but few had witnessed someone blend precision, strategy, and humanity so seamlessly. The calmness in her words made the decisions seem inevitable, yet it was clear that this control was hard-earned. The room, once filled with tension, was now aligned, ready, and mentally prepared for the next phase of operations. Her calm command also served another purpose. It set the tone for the discussion to follow. Officers and analysts were no longer distracted by nerves, doubts, or shock. They were engaged, thinking critically, and ready to participate. Her presence reminded them that even in the most dangerous, high-stakes situations, composure and clarity could guide the team to success. By the time she paused to let her points sink in, the room had transformed. What had started as shock and tension had become focus and engagement. Every officer understood that they were following someone who didn't just lead by rank or title, but by skill, presence, and calm authority. Her words didn't just communicate strategy. They instilled confidence, shaped thinking, and inspired action. In that moment, everyone realized why she was a Marine general. It wasn't just her battlefield experience or her knowledge of tactics. It was her ability to command without chaos, to lead without fear, and to guide people calmly through the pressures of uncertainty. Her calm words had done more than convey a plan. They had transformed the room, focusing minds, steadying nerves, and preparing everyone for the challenges ahead. As the briefing continued, the Marine General's calm command shifted to a deeper level, revealing the true extent of her experience and insight. What had started as strategy and humor now transformed into a profound revelation for everyone in the room. She began to explain not just what had happened in past missions, but why things unfolded the way they did, and how her decisions had shaped the outcomes. It was a moment that forced everyone to pause and recognize the depth of her expertise. She described how every operation she had led was carefully planned, leaving nothing to chance. Each movement of troops, each timing of an attack, and each adjustment to the plan had been meticulously considered. She spoke with clarity, detailing how intelligence, terrain, enemy behavior, and even weather conditions all played a role in decision-making. What made it remarkable was that she conveyed these complex strategies in simple, understandable language, allowing everyone in the room, from seasoned officers to junior analysts, to grasp the logic behind her actions. Her words painted a picture of precision and foresight, and the room was captivated. The revelation went beyond strategy. She explained how she anticipated outcomes and minimized risks not through luck, but through careful observation, experience, and constant learning. Every decision she made had a purpose, every action was calculated, and every move was informed by countless hours of preparation. As she spoke, the officers realized that what seemed effortless to her was actually the result of intense dedication, discipline, and years of facing real danger. The calmness in her voice masked the tremendous responsibility she carried and the countless lives that had depended on her judgment. Her explanation highlighted the human element behind each operation. She spoke about protecting her troops, making decisions under pressure, and the moral responsibility of command. She acknowledged the difficult choices she had faced, the ones that weighed heavily on her even after the mission ended. Yet, she delivered these truths without hesitation, without self-pity, and without dramatics. Her composure and honesty created an atmosphere of trust in the room. Officers understood that her leadership was not just about tactics. It was about empathy, courage, and integrity. As the revelation unfolded, the team began to see patterns in her thinking. She described how she studied her opponents, learned from previous missions, and adjusted strategies in real time. Every success, she explained, was the result of preparation, adaptability, and focus. And even when things didn't go perfectly, she showed how failures became lessons, not excuses. The officers realized that her calm exterior wasn't indifference. It was confidence born from mastery and experience. She had been through situations that tested the limits of human skill and endurance, and she had emerged not just unshaken but wiser. The room, once tense and uncertain, was now filled with a growing sense of awe. Officers and analysts, who had initially been distracted by her joke, were now fully absorbed in her explanation. Every detail of her revelation underscored a simple truth. Leadership at this level was a combination of knowledge, foresight, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Her words were not just a recounting of past missions. They were lessons, carefully delivered, demonstrating what true command looked like in real life. Her calm voice carried another subtle message. Preparation and discipline matter more than panic and emotion. She described moments when split-second decisions saved lives, moments when trust in her team and in her planning made the difference between success and failure. These revelations weren't abstract. They were rooted in reality, in the lives of soldiers she had led. The officers could feel the weight of these experiences, and the respect for her grew with each point she made. What truly stunned the room was how she balanced honesty with confidence. She didn't claim to be infallible, but she demonstrated a level of competence and control that few could match. She admitted that challenges were inevitable and mistakes possible, but her meticulous approach minimized risks and maximized results. The officers began to see the brilliance in her calmness. It was not just personal composure but a tool of leadership. It allowed her to think clearly, act decisively, and guide others effectively, even in the most dangerous situations. As the revelation continued, the room became quieter, every officer fully engaged, every analyst focused. They realized they were witnessing more than a briefing. They were witnessing the mindset of a true leader. Her calm words, her precise explanations, and her unshakable confidence were shaping not just their understanding of operations, but also their understanding of leadership itself. They could see why she was not just respected, but admired, why her subordinates trusted her completely, and why she commanded loyalty without demanding it. By the end of this segment, the officers and analysts were no longer just participants. They were students of her experience. They understood the depth of her skill, the careful thought behind each mission, and the human intelligence that informed every action. The room had been transformed. What began as surprise at her humor and calm presence had evolved into a profound appreciation for her ability to analyze, adapt, and lead under pressure. The revelation had done more than teach strategy. It had revealed the heart and mind of a Marine general who could command with both precision and humanity. In that moment, every officer in the room understood something vital. True leadership is not about showing off power or rank. It is about preparation, composure, and the courage to make difficult decisions while guiding others with clarity and calm. The general had shown them not just what to do, but how to think, how to act, and how to lead in a world where stakes are always life and death. The room remained silent, not out of fear, but out of respect. They had seen the revelation, and it left a lasting impression on everyone present. As the briefing continued, a quiet shift began to take place in the room. The Marine general had already commanded attention through her calm presence, her unexpected humor, and her detailed explanations of strategy. Now something subtler emerged, a moment of reflection. Officers and analysts, who had been tense, alert, and attentive, began to pause internally, quietly considering what they had just witnessed. It was not a reflection prompted by confusion or doubt, but by admiration and the realization of the depth of her leadership. The general continued to speak, though now her words seemed to carry a softer weight. She discussed past missions, not in a way to boast, but to highlight lessons learned, the importance of preparation, and the careful balance between risk and reward. As she spoke, officers could sense the experience behind her calm voice, the countless hours spent making life or death decisions, and the responsibility she carried for every soldier under her command. It was as if every word was both instruction and a subtle invitation to think more deeply about leadership, courage, and accountability. Some younger officers, who had previously been focused solely on tactics and operational details, found themselves thinking in a new way. They began reflecting on their own approach to leadership, realizing how much they had been trained to follow procedures but had rarely witnessed the human intelligence and emotional composure that true command required. They saw that leadership wasn't just about making the right decision. It was about guiding others, inspiring confidence, and maintaining clarity even under extreme pressure. The general had shown them that in a way no textbook could. The seasoned officers, too, experienced their own reflection. They had seen briefings before, some rigid, some precise, some intense, but few had felt the combination of calm authority, humor, and insight that this general displayed. They began to appreciate not just what she had accomplished, but how she had achieved it. Her calmness wasn't just demeanor. It was a tool, honed over years of experience, allowing her to process information clearly, make quick decisions, and maintain focus when others might panic. In reflecting on her approach, they realized that mastery in leadership was as much about controlling oneself as it was about controlling the battlefield. In this moment of reflection, the room also began to understand the value of her subtle humor from earlier. The joke about her confirmed kills, which had initially shocked or amused some, now took on a new meaning. It was part of her way of balancing tension with focus, seriousness with human relatability. Officers realized that her humor had not been frivolous. It had prepared them mentally for the depth of the discussion that followed, helping them remain engaged without fear or rigidity. Her words, both playful and precise, had shaped the mindset of everyone in the room. The general continued by asking questions, subtly encouraging reflection without demanding immediate answers. She would pause, letting her words sink in, observing the reactions of her team, and then move forward. The pauses were powerful. They allowed each person to process not just the facts, but the reasoning, ethics, and judgment behind every decision. In those moments, the officers were quietly reflecting on their own experiences, imagining themselves in her position, and understanding the responsibility inherent in command. This reflection extended beyond tactics or battlefield decisions. The general spoke about resilience, the ability to remain steady under stress, and about humility, acknowledging that no one leader can succeed without a capable team. She highlighted how trust, communication, and mutual respect formed the foundation of successful operations. Officers began to consider how they could integrate these principles into their own roles. The reflection was not passive. It was active, reshaping their understanding of what it meant to lead with integrity and composure. The room also reflected on the courage required to make difficult decisions. The general described situations where split-second choices could mean the difference between life and death. She spoke without exaggeration, focusing instead on clarity and lessons learned. The officers, through their reflection, began to grasp how her calmness allowed her to navigate danger effectively. They realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act decisively despite it. This insight resonated deeply, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. As the reflection deepened, officers began to internalize the human side of leadership. They understood that strategy and tactics alone were not enough. True leadership required empathy, foresight, and the capacity to inspire others to perform at their best even in challenging circumstances. They thought about their own roles, the soldiers they led or would lead, and how they could embody the same principles in their daily duties. The general's words had moved beyond the immediate briefing. They had planted seeds of personal growth and self-awareness. By the time she concluded this portion of the briefing, the officers and analysts were not only attentive but introspective. The room had shifted from observing a leader to understanding her approach and reflecting on their own. They had seen how calm authority, humor, precision, and empathy could coexist to create a leader capable of inspiring loyalty, focus, and excellence. Each officer left the reflection with a deeper understanding of what it meant to lead responsibly, courageously, and wisely. In that quiet but powerful moment, the general had done more than deliver information or strategy. She had guided her team into thinking critically about themselves, their decisions, and their responsibilities. The reflection was a turning point, preparing everyone to not just follow orders, but to internalize principles of leadership, courage, and composure that would influence them long after the briefing ended. It was a subtle yet profound lesson, demonstrating that the greatest leaders don't just command. They inspire reflection, growth, and respect. The room had already gone through tension, humor, reflection, and revelation, but now it reached a moment unlike any before. As the Marine general spoke, her calm, precise, and insightful words began to settle over the entire group like a wave, leaving everyone stunned. Not by fear, but by awe. The officers and analysts, who had been focused and attentive, now experienced a deeper, almost silent recognition of the extraordinary leader in front of them. Her presence, knowledge, and composure combined to create a sense that they were witnessing something rare, a demonstration of mastery in leadership that few had ever seen firsthand. It wasn't just the content of what she said that left them stunned. It was the way she said it. Each sentence was deliberate, carrying authority without force, clarity without arrogance, and calm without indifference. She discussed operations, risks, and outcomes in a way that was simultaneously factual and profound. The room felt the weight of her experience behind every word. They could almost see the countless missions she had led, the critical decisions she had made in moments of life or death pressure, and the responsibility she had carried for every soldier under her command. It was as if her very calmness radiated confidence, and confidence demanded respect. The officers' initial reactions ranged from wide-eyed surprise to quiet disbelief. Some younger officers whispered to each other, barely able to contain their astonishment. "She's incredible," one said softly. "I can't believe how composed she is," another replied. The more seasoned officers, who had experienced many briefings, quietly nodded to themselves, recognizing the rare combination of skill, authority, and human intelligence before them. They understood that this general didn't just lead by rank or title. She led by presence, experience, and an almost magnetic command of attention. Her humor from earlier, which had initially seemed out of place, now made perfect sense. The joke had been a subtle signal, a way to assert control, capture attention, and prepare the room for the serious lessons that followed. Combined with her calm explanations and reflections, it highlighted the range of her leadership skills. The ability to balance tension with levity, seriousness with relatability, and authority with approachability. It became clear that nothing about her approach was accidental. Every gesture, word, and pause was deliberate and served a purpose. As she continued, she outlined scenarios that tested decision-making, foresight, and moral courage. She spoke about situations where intelligence reports were incomplete, where enemy movements were unpredictable, and where choices had to be made with limited information. Her calm delivery, coupled with the clarity of her logic, made even the most complex and dangerous situations understandable. For the officers, this was a revelation. A leader who could think clearly under pressure, guide others without panic, and anticipate outcomes with precision. It was a skill few could truly master, and it left the room stunned. Even more remarkable was how she acknowledged the human side of these operations. She spoke not only about strategy but about responsibility, empathy, and moral decision-making. She explained how she considered the safety of her team, how she weighed consequences, and how she ensured that her orders protected lives as much as they achieved objectives. Her calmness did not come from detachment. It came from mastery, preparation, and experience. The officers realized that this combination of intellect and empathy was rare, and it elevated her leadership far beyond what titles and rank alone could convey. The analysts in the room, who were trained to scrutinize data, maps, and reports, found themselves equally captivated by the human intelligence she displayed. They noticed how she connected operational facts to broader consequences, teaching without preaching, explaining without condescension. Her words encouraged critical thinking, self-reflection, and awareness of the stakes involved in every decision. They understood that the lesson was not just about military strategy. It was about what it meant to lead with courage, wisdom, and composure. By the time she paused to answer questions, the room was quiet. There was no chatter, no side conversations, just officers and analysts fully absorbed, processing everything she had said. Her calm authority had transformed the atmosphere. What began as tension had evolved into admiration, and admiration had become awe. Each person in the room felt the impact of her words on a personal level, recognizing that leadership required not just skill, but patience, reflection, empathy, and courage under pressure. Some officers even caught themselves holding their breath as they absorbed her explanations, almost as if realizing that every word carried lessons that could shape their own leadership for years to come. They were stunned because they had never seen someone command a room so completely, without shouting, without dramatics, and without fear. It was a lesson in presence, in influence, and in authority that transcended formal rank. They were witnessing how a true leader could inspire confidence, focus, and respect through calmness, clarity, and strategic thinking. As the briefing drew to a close, the sense of awe lingered. The room remained silent for a moment, each officer reflecting internally on what they had just witnessed. They had seen a Marine general who could joke about difficult truths, speak calmly about life and death decisions, and teach lessons of leadership in a way that was unforgettable. They were stunned not because she intimidated them, but because she showed them what leadership could truly look like: composed, wise, human, and extraordinary. In that moment, every officer understood something profound. Respect and authority are not demanded. They are earned through skill, composure, and the ability to guide others thoughtfully. The general had demonstrated all of these qualities effortlessly. The room was left stunned, not just by her words, but by the presence of a leader who had mastered the balance of intellect, empathy, courage, and calm. This moment would stay with them long after the briefing ended, serving as a benchmark for the kind of leadership they aspired to embody. As the briefing drew to a close, the officers and analysts slowly began to realize the full impact of what they had witnessed. The Marine general had not just delivered a report or explained strategy. She had created an experience that would linger in their minds long after they left the room. Her calm presence, unexpected humor, meticulous planning, and clear explanations had combined to leave a lasting impression, one that went beyond the immediate details of the operations discussed. The room, once tense and filled with curiosity, now felt charged with respect and admiration. Officers who had been skeptical or uncertain now looked at her with quiet awe. They had seen someone who could walk into a room, make a joke about something as serious as confirmed kills, and then turn that tension into focus, reflection, and insight. She had guided them not just through the logistics of military operations, but through lessons in leadership, courage, and the importance of composure under pressure. This was more than a briefing, it was a masterclass in what it means to lead. The general noticed the quiet reverence in the room, but she remained composed, never demanding attention, never seeking applause. Her presence alone had achieved what words often fail to do. She had earned respect through action, clarity, and authenticity. As she stepped back from the podium, officers approached her quietly, some with questions, others with expressions that conveyed gratitude and admiration. They spoke of insights they had gained, of perspectives they had never considered before, and of the clarity her calm command had brought to complex situations. The lasting impression she left was not just about her knowledge or experience. It was about the way she carried herself. Officers began to reflect on their own leadership styles, considering how they could emulate her calm authority, her balance of humor and seriousness, and her ability to inspire confidence without intimidation. They realized that her approach was not simply about managing operations, it was about managing people, emotions, and the mindset of an entire team. She had shown them that true leadership requires not just skill, but humanity, foresight, and the courage to make difficult decisions while remaining composed. In the days and weeks that followed, the story of the briefing spread throughout the command. Officers spoke of the Marine general who could joke about confirmed kills, yet leave a room stunned by her insight, calmness, and intelligence. They shared how her words had reshaped the way they thought about strategy, teamwork, and leadership. The lessons she imparted weren't just theoretical. They were practical, memorable, and deeply inspiring. Many officers reflected on the experience as a turning point in their careers, a moment that would influence the way they led and the decisions they made in the future. Her impact extended beyond the immediate team. Analysts who had been present in the room carried her lessons into their own work, approaching intelligence, planning, and reporting with a renewed sense of purpose and attention to detail. Junior officers shared stories of her calm authority and precise explanations with peers, using her approach as a model for handling high-pressure situations. The impression she left was a ripple effect, spreading far beyond the walls of the briefing room, touching every corner of the command she influenced. Even for those who had been initially shocked or unsure about her humor, the message became clear. Leadership, as she demonstrated, was about more than rigid protocols or rank. It was about presence, preparation, empathy, and composure. She had shown that a leader could guide a team through uncertainty and danger with clarity and calm, earning loyalty, respect, and admiration not through fear, but through competence and humanity. Officers realized that the joke she made was not a frivolous remark. It was part of a larger lesson about confidence, control, and the power of a leader who understands both strategy and people. The lasting impression was also personal. Many officers found themselves reflecting on their own values, courage, and ability to make decisions under pressure. They thought about how they could cultivate the same calm, decisive presence, and how they could lead with integrity and empathy in addition to skill. Her briefing became more than a military exercise. It became a source of inspiration, a benchmark for what leadership could and should be. As the final moments of the briefing passed, the room remained quietly aware of the presence of someone extraordinary. The officers and analysts knew they had witnessed a demonstration of leadership at its finest. A combination of intelligence, courage, composure, empathy, and confidence that few could match. The lasting impression was not fleeting. It was something that would shape how they approached their work, how they led their teams, and how they made decisions in the future. Finally, as the general left the room, a subtle energy lingered in the air. Officers quietly returned to their work, but they did so with a renewed sense of purpose and understanding. They had not only received information, they had been taught, inspired, and shown the power of leadership that combines clarity, courage, and humanity. The room itself seemed transformed, as if her presence had left an invisible mark on everyone present. In the end, the lasting impression was clear. Leadership is not just about giving orders or achieving objectives. It is about inspiring confidence, guiding others through uncertainty, and combining skill, calm, and humanity in every decision. The Marine general had left the room with more than just respect. She had left a profound lesson, one that officers and analysts would carry with them for the rest of their careers, shaping their actions, decisions, and understanding of what it truly means to lead.